Hello everyone, you're watching the channel Stories of Our Life. Friends, make yourselves comfortable. I wish you to truly enjoy listening to this life story.
The train stations of major cities resemble teleporters from science fiction movies. Trains arrive and depart strictly according to schedule, and passengers passing through the station enter a completely different dimension. Mr. Dustin loved traveling by train, and each trip led him to unexpected conclusions. The similarity between an ordinary train station and a teleporter was discovered by a philosophy professor from the Capital University during his last journey. This trip was compulsory, so the scientist's spouse, Mrs. Mary, did not share her partner's enthusiastic mood. "Dustin, you're like a child. Every little thing excites you. What could be charming about a train?" Mrs. Mary always looked at her husband's discontent with a philosophical gaze, trying to turn it into a joke. "Everything about it is delightful, my dear. Do you remember the children's cartoon about the locomotive?" The woman expressed her outrage loudly. "Dustin, what locomotive are you talking about? I think you urgently need to see a doctor because you're slipping into childish nonsense." "My dear, don't jump to conclusions. Childhood nonsense is a very rare disorder. It occurs only in children, so I'm not the right age for it," the professor laughed cheerfully, while his wife remained silent. Mrs. Mary couldn't give her husband a worthy retort for many reasons. But the main obstacle was her lack of education. She had come to conquer the capital a long time ago, but luck didn't favor her. That's why the girl had to look for any kind of job. Through the patronage of her uncle, who managed to firmly establish himself in the best city on earth, she got a job at the professor's house. Dustin's father worked a lot and needed a secretary. Other girls from the province tried to take that position, but Mary confidently surpassed all competitors. She managed to conquer not only the professor himself but also his son, who was finishing university at that time. When Dustin's mother learned that he was courting the secretary, she almost had a heart attack. "I won't allow my son to marry a stupid provincial girl." Dustin's mother had an exceptional lineage. She didn't even consider the possibility of an unequal marriage, but the young man's father silenced her with a single sentence. "My dear, even the most intellectually gifted woman often falls short compared to an ordinary woman. I don't want my son to repeat my mistakes." Such offensive sarcasm temporarily rendered Dustin's mother speechless. And by the time she regained her composure, her husband was already dictating another scientific article to the secretary. The woman was not allowed to quarrel with him publicly due to their high status. Although Mary was born and raised in the province, she had a sharp mind. The girl quickly realized that the professor could change his opinion under the influence of his wife, so she shouldn't waste any time. Dustin was a very docile young man, and being in love made him submissive. Soon, Mary led her fiancé by the hand up the steps of the marriage palace. Everyone rejoiced at the union of the young couple, except for the groom's mother, who whispered in despair, "This marriage won't last long anyway. I'll do everything to rid our home of this girl." And indeed, the mother-in-law did everything possible and impossible to achieve this goal. But she didn't consider the fact that her daughter-in-law would skillfully use her own means against her. Mary didn't cry into her pillow or complain to the old professor or her husband. She gracefully repelled all of her mother-in-law's attacks. This battle between the women lasted nearly 2 years and ended with a clear victory for the provincial girl. One evening during a family dinner, Mary, modestly lowering her gaze, announced, "Dustin and I will soon have a child." It was a blow to the solar plexus, and Dustin's mother choked on her grilled chicken. The woman even had to be given mineral water to regain the ability to breathe and speak normally. Later that evening, the mother-in-law found a convenient moment and expressed everything she thought to the bride. "Well, you handled the task skillfully. You deceived all of us so cleverly. You are a good teacher. It is with your involvement that I have passed the school of life." For a while, the women stood facing each other in a small corridor between the kitchen and the living room. The mother-in-law was the first to make peace. "All right, let's not argue anymore. If my son is happy with you, I'm willing to tolerate your company." Of course, the mother-in-law tried repeatedly to harm her daughter-in-law, but Mary always responded in kind. However, with the arrival of the little girl in the house, the women temporarily reconciled. The ice in the mother-in-law's heart completely melted. I really want my granddaughter to proudly bear this name. Little Diana didn't care at all about her grandmother's thoughts. She lived the life of an ordinary child, playing around, throwing tantrums, and sometimes doing naughty things. But her parents and grandfather forgave her for everything. That's how they lived, all together in the spacious professor's apartment. Dustin successfully climbed one step after another, moving toward the pinnacle of his career. But in turbulent times, much changed, including the attitude towards science. The old professor was practically pushed out of the university, but they made it look beautiful, organizing pompous farewell celebrations for his well-deserved retirement. The professor took the departure from the university very hard and fell into a long period of depression. He no longer wrote scientific articles, and only his granddaughter occasionally managed to pull him out of the oppressive apathy. Just over a year later, the old professor passed away. Those who expelled him from the university gave passionate speeches during the farewell, while his widow whispered, "What kind of despicable person must one be to be so hypocritical? A bunch of two-faced animals, not humans. They are ready to devour anyone without choking." Hearing such coarse language from a usually reserved woman was unusual, but Mary understood her mother-in-law perfectly. Then, at the cemetery, she embraced her for the first time and whispered, "Mama, stay strong and remember that you are not alone." The mother-in-law gratefully looked into her daughter-in-law's eyes. "Thank you, my dear. Now I worry about them not causing harm to Dustin." Similar concerns were also present in Mary's mind, and she often said to her husband, "Dustin, you should express yourself less at the university. You know what times we live in. Mediocrity is now in favor, and those who try to defend their opinions are shoved aside." But Dustin, almost attaining the title of professor, disagreed with his wife. He was obsessed with his work and didn't believe that he could suffer the same fate as his father. "Mary, believe me, no one would dare to put me on the street. At the moment, I am heading several important projects." The young professor devoted all his time to his beloved work, so his loved ones rarely saw him. His mother was deeply concerned about this. "Dustin is just repeating his father's mistakes. And he's so stubborn that you can't convince him otherwise." The mother-in-law's interests now narrowed down to her family. She rarely left the house. Within 3 years, she outlived her husband. A few months before her death, she asked her daughter-in-law for forgiveness, and then said, "I was fortunate to encounter such a determined person like you on my path. My son is truly happy with you, and that brings joy to a mother's heart. I can't even imagine how his destiny would have turned out if I had managed to separate you back then. Thank God it didn't happen. And to you, my dear, I want to say, never, I repeat, never try to interfere in Diana's life." The unusual appeal from the mother-in-law unsettled the young woman, but she demanded an oath from her. She agreed. "I promise not to disrupt Diana's life. Mary, I will be watching over you from above." The daughter-in-law thought to herself that her mother-in-law had completely lost her mind, but she didn't say anything out loud. The mother-in-law did not return to this topic again. And 2 months later, she quietly passed away in her sleep. This tragic event coincided with Mr. Dustin being awarded the title of professor. However, a series of changes followed this significant event, and not all of them were pleasant. Due to the whims of higher officials, the university was disbanded. The management of the institution where Mr. Dustin worked was handed over to someone far removed from science. The status of the educational institution and its name changed. Along with these changes, informants and instigators became more active within the collective. One of the first victims of their activities was Professor Dustin. Although Mrs. Mary was not officially part of the institute's staff, she was aware of all the intrigues and was the first to learn about the impending trouble. "Dustin, I've received information that they want to get rid of you. Someone was strongly displeased with your behavior." The man was optimistic. "It's all gossip. Don't believe them. Without me and my research group, the university will stagnate. Dustin, do you know what the most popular expression is nowadays? The professor shrugged in bewilderment. No. And why should I clutter my mind with unnecessary information? You're mistaken. It is now customary to say that there are no irreplaceable people. Nonsense. Only idiots can say such a thing. But just a few days after that conversation, Dustin was offered a transfer to a recently opened branch of their institute in another regional center. The offer was made in a very polite manner, but he had no choice and had to prepare for the relocation. While the head of the family took the transfer to a new workplace relatively calmly, his spouse was in despair. Dustin. Go see your director, talk to him, explain that you can't uproot yourself, you have a family. I can't imagine our daughter going to a regular school and sitting at the same desk with the son of some janitor. Mr. Dustin always put a stop to such statements. This time was no different. Once again, your unhealthy ambitions. As if royal blood runs through your veins. I implore you, please refrain from speaking in such a tone in front of me. Mrs. Mary knew it was better not to provoke her husband's emotions and heeded his warning. However, as the departure date drew closer, the atmosphere in the house became more tense. Another outburst of dissatisfaction from the woman occurred when she learned that they would be traveling to their new place of residence by train. A month before the planned departure date, she began pleading with her husband, Dustin. Normal people fly on planes. It's fast and convenient. Why did you decide to take the train? The man objected. Mary, you're only partially right. We're taking the train because air travel is by no means a safe pleasure. You're mistaken. I read in some magazine that statistically, accidents happen more often on trains. Don't trust various pseudo-experts too much. Statistics is a very conditional science. Although it is based on accurate numbers, I won't bore you with explanations so as not to give you a headache. But all surveys and different tests cannot reflect reality because they involve a very limited group of people. Mary always approached her husband's statements skeptically. On that day, when they had this conversation, she also sarcastically remarked, "Of course, what do we, mere mortals, know compared to a luminary of science like you? After all, we are limited people." The man objected. "Mary, it's not nice of you to distort my words. I was not talking about the limitations of people, but rather about the need for a specific audience when conducting surveys. And please, let's stop this unnecessary discussion. It takes up time and nerves." I completely agree with you there. But I'm categorically against taking the train. Just the thought of shaking for almost 2 days in a carriage. The professor hugged his wife. Not 2 days, just 36 hours. But you can sleep as much as you want and look out the window. When I was little, I traveled the entire country by train with my parents. I sit by the window and watch how the scenery changes, like in a movie. I remember once we missed the train with my father. The woman waved her hand dismissively. Dustin, you've told me this story at least 200 times already. You fell behind, and then you rode on a tractor to the next station and caught up with the train there. It was almost like in a movie. Mrs. Mary became thoroughly angry with her husband. She vented her frustration on the housemaid. The professor heard his wife reprimanding her. Why does everything keep slipping through your fingers? If you treat other people's property so carelessly, you'll break all my dishes. What am I paying you for? I always have to redo your work. Kimberly had been working in the house with the owners for many years, and during the summer, she would move to their country cottage. She would return to her city apartment by winter. This resilient woman didn't pay much attention to the quirks and demands of the new mistress. She calmly listened to the professor's wife, but continued to do things her own way. In cases where clarification was needed regarding household management, the housemaid would directly approach Dustin. When Kimberly learned about the impending departure of the professor's family, she also asked him, "Sir, what should I do here without you? Are you planning to dismiss me?" The man looked at the housemaid as if she were a student who hadn't prepared for an exam. "Don't talk nonsense. You have long become a part of our family, and we won't manage without you. During our absence, you will take care of the house. Don't worry, we're not parting ways forever. As soon as everything normalizes, we'll return to the capital. Such a detailed answer satisfied the woman. But just to be sure, she asked again, and when will you come back? The professor became embarrassed. To be honest, I don't know myself yet. There's nothing constant in this life. You have to adapt to changes. The topic of conversation was exhausted, and Kimberly also busied herself with preparing the owners for their departure. She was most concerned about Diana, as she believed the girl wouldn't be able to stand up for herself. Mrs. Mary led a social lifestyle, so the professor's daughter spent most of her time with the housemaid. Diana had a calm character and didn't brag about her father's status. When she found out about the move to another city, she even jumped for joy. You can't imagine how happy I am that I won't have to go to the gymnasium where all the teachers are idiots and the students are complete fools. Hearing such epithets from a 12-year-old girl, the housemaid almost fainted. My dear girl, where did you pick up such words? At the elite gymnasium. I don't go anywhere else, I'm under house arrest. Kimberly experienced another shock. Diana, you can't talk like that. You have everything that other children can only dream of. You know, I'm ready to give them everything in exchange for freedom from my mom and dad. And you, and all of you, think that the gymnasium they pushed me into is a decent place, supposedly where we study languages and etiquette rules. Nothing of the sort. The rules there are terrible. Worse than in a juvenile detention center. Kimberly refused to believe the girl's words. But I heard that the best teachers work at this gymnasium. Oh, yeah. This is one of those cases where our teachers don't care about us at all. Their main goal is to squeeze as much money as possible out of parents. So I'm glad I won't see many unpleasant faces anymore. The teenager's revelations prompted the housemaid to consider telling everything to the parents, but Diana preemptively asked, Kimberly, you won't tell my parents anything, will you? After all, we're friends. The housemaid couldn't resist the girl's pleading gaze. I won't tell them if you promise to behave properly and not use such words. Diana threw herself into the woman's arms and showered her with kisses. On the day of departure, the girl unexpectedly burst into tears, and her worried mother began asking her daughter about the reason for her tears. Diana confessed, I don't want to part with Kimberly. Mom, why can't she come with us? The father answered this question. Your mother and I don't even know for sure what kind of accommodation we've been assigned. God willing, it's a well-appointed apartment. But it's possible we'll have to squeeze into a dormitory. Dad, you're a professor. But students live in dormitories. Mr. Dustin just sighed. He didn't bother explaining to his daughter the social intricacies of modern society. In short, each member of the professor's family had their own anxieties related to the departure. Some wanted to postpone the event, while others wanted to bring it closer. Despite the negative mood, Mary coped with the journey better than her daughter and husband. Diana yawned from boredom the entire way and couldn't wait for the torture to end, while Dustin envisioned various scenarios for settling into the new place, as he had worked at his university for so many years and had become deeply attached to it. But their fantastical idea crumbled to dust as soon as they stepped onto the platform. A crowd of people rushed towards the train station building, and they struggled to keep up with the rhythm of this lively flow. Heavy suitcases strained their arms, making the newcomers' plight even more difficult. Dustin asked, Are there no porters here? A passing man cheerfully replied, There are. They can carry your belongings so far that you'll never see them again. Mrs. Mary said hopelessly, Yes, we've landed ourselves in a hole. But Diana remained silent. She dragged her backpack on the ground and grumbled discontentedly. However, she thought to herself, Mom is right. This is definitely a terrible place. They crossed the interior of the train station building and came out on the other side. Mr. Dustin nodded towards a direction and said, Let's go there and catch a taxi. The three of them headed towards the taxi stand, but before they could take a few steps, a car with a checker pattern abruptly stopped near them. Mary recoiled and dropped her bag. The driver got out of the taxi and announced in a broadcasting voice, "Welcome to our city. I will take you quickly and for a small fee to any destination." A short, strong-built man took advantage of the potential passengers' momentary confusion and quickly loaded all the suitcases and bags into the trunk. There wasn't enough space in the trunk for Diana's backpack, but the taxi driver found a solution to this small problem. "Let's put the backpack in the car's cabin." The whole family settled into the car. Dustin gave the driver the address, and the driver commented, "So, you're heading to the academic town? That's where our scientific elite resides. We recently opened a new university, or to be precise, just changed the sign on the old one." But the way it was all orchestrated, rumors immediately spread in the newspapers that any young person could acquire a sought-after specialty. Yes, nowadays, everything is possible if you have the money. Mrs. Mary listened to the driver's monologue and frowned. This person irritated her with his empty chatter. To interrupt him, she asked, "Tell me, sir, do you greet everyone like this?" "What do you mean?" "Well, with grand gestures and solemn speeches." "I apologize if I caused you any unpleasant moments." The professor settled in the front seat next to the driver. And when his wife rudely reprimanded the man, he gave her an unkind look. An oppressive silence filled the car, and Mr. Dustin decided to break the tension. Ignoring his wife, he started talking to the taxi driver. "You mentioned the new university. I'm headed there for work. I can't even imagine how I'll adapt to the new place." The driver smiled again. "I don't like changes either. When they disbanded our taxi fleet, I didn't know what to do. I won't deny that desperate thoughts crossed my mind. If it weren't for my wife and son, my boy, he's probably the same age as your daughter. Our daughter just turned 12. In the capital, she attended an elite gymnasium. We'll have to enroll her in a regular school here. Don't think we don't have civilization here. We also have plenty of new schools for the little ones, so that definitely won't be a problem." Mary sarcastically commented on the taxi driver's words. He spoke and looked at the professor. "You have a strict wife." Mary wanted to respond to the impertinent taxi driver in a way that would make a lasting impression. But the car stopped. "Here we are, gentlemen. Stop, academic town. I wish you good luck and a smooth settling in." Ignoring the woman, the taxi driver handed Dustin a small plastic card. It was the first time in his life that he had given a ride to a real professor. "Just in case, take my business card. You never know when you might need to go somewhere. I'll always be happy to help you." The taxi drove away and quickly disappeared around the corner. Mrs. Mary said, "What an unpleasant guy." "I think this person hasn't done anything bad to you," replied the professor. He picked up the suitcases and headed towards the main building. His wife could barely keep up with him. "Dustin, think about it. If taxi drivers here hand out business cards, I can only imagine what kind of life awaits us. Dear, he's a normal person, sociable, and very pleasant. I've formed a different opinion of him. But I hope we won't encounter him again and he won't persistently offer his services," Mary said. "Mama, why don't you like everyone?" Diana spoke up for the first time since arriving in the unfamiliar city. "Daughter, I'd also like to hear the answer to that question." "You know, sometimes it seems to me that our mom came from another planet," replied Dustin. "Have you conspired against me? Just wait. I'll make your life miserable," Mary exclaimed, but her cheerfulness quickly faded. When they entered the apartment where they would now be living, the professor's wife went from room to room. "What a dump. Hard to believe that a person with an academic degree lived here," she remarked. "Mary, not everyone should be judged by your own standards. They clearly told you that the previous tenant didn't lead a particularly decent lifestyle. The child shouldn't hear about this." "I don't see anything terrible, we'll do some cosmetic repairs," Dustin reasoned. Dustin, what cosmetic repairs? Don't you smell the odors here? The walls are soaked. Anyway, do as you please, but Diana and I will stay in a hotel for now. The professor tried to object. But that's unnecessary expenses, and I can't handle the repairs on my own. Hire people, call that taxi driver of yours. He promised to help you, Mary said with undisguised sarcasm in her voice, but the professor didn't fall for her words since there was no point in trying to convince her. Dustin fell silent. In his mind, he started calculating the upcoming expenses, and the amount he arrived at shocked him. Despite his academic degree, his salary at his previous job wasn't particularly high. And considering that they still had to maintain their apartment in the capital and their country house, they had to save every penny. Before leaving, they even had to sell his late father's old car to a collector to cover all the expenses. Mr. Dustin had hoped to buy a cheap car right away here, but after seeing the apartment, he decided to postpone that purchase. In his life, Ronald had encountered different people and learned to determine the character of passengers at a glance. After meeting the family of the capital's professor, he couldn't shake off the unpleasant feeling of some unspoken tension. With her behavior and just a few phrases, the professor's wife wanted to assert her superiority. If it weren't for her husband and the little girl who hadn't uttered a word throughout the journey, Ronald would have dropped them off after the first turn. But the head of the family evoked sympathy in him. What bad luck for a person to have such a snake for a wife. Why is it that good people often have no luck, he thought. After dropping off memorable passengers near the academic town, Ronald headed back to the train station because that was where he could earn good money. Ronald and his family lived modestly, so the head of the family had to work from early morning until late at night. His wife scolded him, saying, "Ronald, you'll work yourself into an early grave." "Thanks, dear, for the bright prediction. But I'd like to postpone that moment," he replied. "It's better to arrive there later because our son and I can't do without you for long. So please, calm down your enthusiasm a bit. You can't earn all the money anyway. But that's what one should strive for. Do you even hear me? When will you start listening to what I'm telling you? I'm not a stranger to you, I'm your own wife. That's why I'm trying, but you keep scolding me. I'm a man, and I have to take care of you. That's how my father raised me. I hope our son will also learn this important rule." This vivid and sometimes dramatic scene unfolded before the eyes of 13-year-old Willie. The boy was accustomed to such arguments between his parents and paid no attention to their latest relationship dispute. The small, two-room apartment didn't allow the teenager to have a corner of his own, so he had to witness the stormy arguments between his parents almost daily. Due to the lack of space, Ronald and his wife had no choice but to discuss everything in their son's presence. But there was some benefit to it. "Dad, I've already memorized all your rules by heart, but you come up with something new every day. To save time, you should print a separate code of conduct for me at the printing press. It would make things much easier," Willie provocatively suggested. "You shouldn't talk to your father like that." Challengingly, the teenager asked, "Why is everything allowed for you, but not for me? You argue with each other every day, and it's exhausting to listen to. And then you try to teach me good manners." Willie headed towards the hallway, and Ronald followed him. "Son, wait. Let's talk," Ronald called out. The teenager stopped in his tracks, but his face expressed clear disdain. "Well, I'm standing here." The tension in the man's nerves started to rise. "Now answer me, who are you talking to?" "Men, don't argue so much. And you, Willie, need to know your limits, your father is right in front of you. Show at least a drop of respect. Then let him respect me too." The head of the family spoke with his authoritative voice. "This still needs to be earned. Instead of keeping quiet, you keep opening your mouth," he said. Willie abruptly turned around and stormed out the door. Carol reproached her husband. "Ronald, how many times have I asked you to be a little gentler with the boy? You know he's going through a difficult period. Remember yourself at his age. I worked with my father in the fields from dawn till dusk, quite literally. At his age, it never even crossed my mind to say a word against my father, he replied. The man walked into the kitchen and took out a bottle of beer from the refrigerator. Carol waved her hands. Ronald, you have work tonight. I have a day off. I have the right to. Just half an hour ago, you were telling me how I'm wearing myself out with work. So, I'll take a break and have a beer. The woman knew that such mood swings in her husband didn't bode well. She nodded in agreement. And rightly so. Rest up. Ronald looked suspiciously at his wife. Carol, why are you saying that? After almost 20 years of living together, the spouses had learned to sense each other's moods even from a distance. Even before their son's hasty departure, Ronald felt that his wife was hiding something from him. Using the process of elimination, he realized that she could only be concealing another misdeed of Willie. Carol pretended not to hear her husband's question and started chopping vegetables again. Ronald finished his beer and stood up. Carol, you're a terrible conspirator. It's written all over your face. Come on, tell me, what has that fool done again? The woman exhaled as if her diaphragm was being squeezed. Why would you think that, Ronald? Our son is doing fine. His supervisor even came to my department yesterday, Carol began to explain while fidgeting with the edge of the towel. You can't hide anything from you. You're like an X-ray. Yes, our son has distinguished himself again. Well, don't keep me waiting. If you've mentioned his misdeeds, then tell me everything. What has that fool started this time? He sold the school's scrap metal. Kids from different grades collected various pieces of iron for a whole month. The school had an agreement with a company where all this junk was supposed to be turned in. But our Willie found another company, and he also found a truck. Without the knowledge of the teachers, he pulled off the whole thing with his own company, Carol exclaimed. And what, did he keep the money for himself? Carol protested. You have such a poor opinion of your own son. On the contrary, the proceeds from the scrap metal exceeded the planned amount. But the teachers are outraged by his self-will and all that. Willie was called to the principal's office. A scandal broke out. I won't retell what our son said to the school administration, but the principal said. What? The man interrupted his wife. She said that they won't tolerate it anymore. Frankly, I don't understand what complaints they have against the boy when they received more money. I don't understand it either, the man gently embraced his wife. Darling, don't take it to heart. They won't go anywhere. Willie is one of the best students in the school. He wins in all the competitions. If things continue like this, we won't survive until he finishes school. Okay, I'll have a talk with him. What kind of person is he? The head of the family had asked himself this question many times, but he couldn't find an answer. From an early age, Willie was characterized by pragmatism. Even in kindergarten, he traded sweets in his group for a toy he liked. The family budget didn't allow for expensive remote-controlled cars, so little Willie decided to solve this problem himself. He exchanged a favored toy for candy or a pack of wafers. The unequal trade wasn't immediately discovered. The mother of one of the boys with whom Willie most often made trades decided to find out where her son's toys were disappearing to. And that very boy told his mother everything. The woman was clearly unhappy with what was happening in the kindergarten but spoke politely with the teacher. Dear, it might have been understandable if my son traded his toy for a chocolate bar or even an orange. But it was just simple candies. I kindly request that you look into this matter with Willie. The teacher had extensive experience and made a reasonable observation. Well, dear mother, don't let your son bring expensive toys to kindergarten. We have plenty of technology in our group, and it's not necessary to bring cars from home. If your son can't live without them, let him take something simpler. But we don't have simple toys. My husband and I try to buy the best for our only son. The teacher looked at the mother with a penetrating gaze. We have a regular kindergarten, and not all parents can afford to buy expensive toys. You should consider this fact. The parents of the boy took note of what the teacher said. And Ronald, Willie's father, when he learned about his little son's antics, conducted an interrogation. "Where are the cars that you exchanged with the boy from your group in kindergarten?" Willie showed his father his hiding place near the sandbox on the playground. The man retrieved not only 2 cars from the fairly deep hole but also a shovel, building blocks, and other junk. He cleaned all the findings from the sand and put them in a bag. The next morning, the man took everything he found to the kindergarten. When the mother of the boy who was the victim arrived, he handed her the bag of belongings. "Here are all your toys." "I'm sorry it turned out this way," he said. The woman felt embarrassed and, for some reason, remembered about the candies. But Ronald cut her off before she could finish. "We may be poor, but we have self-respect. I won't make a fuss over candies. And overall, I believe that sometimes it's beneficial to let children solve their own problems. It develops their sense of responsibility." The woman looked at Ronald with a displeased expression but didn't say anything. After that incident with the candies, Willie calmed down for a long time. But by the 5th grade, he developed a penchant for accumulating personal capital. To ensure a steady income, he started writing essays and tests for his classmates on various subjects. Each type of work had its own price, and the list of offered services even included doing homework. Willie's entrepreneurial activity came to light by chance. Ronald sent his son to the store while he himself was busy repairing a faucet in the bathroom. The doorbell rang, and the man thought it was his son returning from the grocery store so quickly. But at the doorstep stood one of Willie's classmates, whom the host politely invited in. "Come in, Willie will be back soon. Do you have an urgent matter with him?" At the age of 10, most children don't know how to lie, and the boy blurted out without a second thought, "You guessed it, Uncle Ronald. Willie promised to do my math and write a history essay for me before noon." Ronald asked, puzzled, "So, Willie does your homework for you?" "Well, firstly, Willie is very smart, and he doesn't do our homework for free," the boy replied. It took a moment for the meaning of his son's friend's words to sink in for the man. "Wait, I don't quite understand what you're saying," Ronald said. Well, we have an agreement in our class, those who perform well help those who are falling behind. Why are you stuttering? Speak clearly. So, the top students get paid for their help, right? But it's fair. If you're born dumb, you can't change nature. So it's better to pay and not ruin the future, he continued. Uncle Ronald, everyone does it nowadays, it's like market relations. The man wanted to put an end to his son's activities. But when Willie returned from the store with bread and milk, he didn't pay any attention to his father's lecturing. "Dad, everyone earns however they can. You drive a taxi, Mom sells shoes and boots. And I contribute with my brain power. If God made me smart, then I should use this gift correctly," Willie said. "But you're taking money from other kids," Ronald objected. "No one forces them, they willingly give me money. And why should I strain my brain for free?" "And what are your rates?" Ronald asked. At first, the boy didn't understand what his father was asking, but then he realized he meant the pricing. "It depends on the difficulty of the task. If it's a quarterly test, it will be more expensive, but doing homework costs next to nothing," Willie replied. Ronald took a long time to recover from the shock. Willie mistook his father's perplexity for approval and continued to develop the topic. "Dad, I'm not some kind of monster, I don't demand money right away. In short, I have a system, like a bank." The man looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time. Willie smiled widely. "I don't give or lend my money to anyone, I'm saving up for a bicycle." Ronald remained silent, while Willie enthusiastically began to speculate about the future. "Dad, when I grow up, I'll definitely become either a banker or a successful businessman. Of course, being a banker is better. I'll have a lot of money, I'll buy you a whole fleet of cars. And I'll buy Mom a shoe store." On that day, almost 3 years ago, Ronald, for the first time, wondered where his son got such abilities. He and his wife were very worried that their son's unusual inclinations could turn into criminal behavior in the future. but the emerging desire in Willie for an interesting and prosperous life was already impossible to eradicate. However, over these years, society had also changed significantly, and many teenagers were successfully earning money the same way as Willie. Mrs. Mary walked from room to room, scrutinizing the renovated apartment with a critical eye. She was trying to find even the smallest flaw to reduce the cost of the repairs, while the foreman patiently awaited payment. The foreman had encountered such clients before, so the behavior of the professor's wife didn't faze him at all. He even chose a convenient moment and said cheerfully, "Madam, you're wasting your time. Believe me, we did the renovation as if it were for ourselves. And if it weren't for Ronald, my guys probably wouldn't have agreed to work at such low rates." Dustin felt uncomfortable watching his spouse and quickly took out his wallet. "Everything is fine, you did an excellent job. The most important thing is that it was done quickly. My wife and I have no complaints about you. After all, we didn't even expect everything to be finished by September 1st. Now our daughter can study peacefully in her room." The foreman optimistically remarked, "You've expressed your wishes, and for us, the customer's wishes are law." The professor began counting the bills, but Mrs. Mary sternly remarked, "Dustin, don't rush. I noticed an unfinished detail in the bathroom." The foreman pleaded, "Madam, you're simply nitpicking. This house was built half a century ago and has never undergone a major renovation. We've done even more than we could. We've been working tirelessly here," desperation evident in the man's voice. Dustin decided to expedite the payment process, ignoring his wife's expressive glances. He handed the money to the foreman. "Here's the full amount we agreed upon, and a little extra. Thank you very much for the quality work." The foreman was satisfied that the matter had been resolved successfully and hurriedly left. As soon as the new metal door closed behind him, Mrs. Mary began scolding her husband. "Dustin, I'm amazed by your lack of assertiveness. You're willing to please anyone, even someone like that foreman. It's written all over his face that he's an opportunist. And how does this quality manifest itself? It manifests in the fact that people have made this apartment look heavenly. Mary, how many times have I asked you not to speak that way about people in front of me? If I were to listen to you, you're the smartest, most well-mannered, and overall the best of the best. Your arrogance exhausts me." "All right, calm down, I promise to restrain myself in the future," the woman charmingly smiled and leaned towards her husband. "I try my best for us. I just wanted to save a little on this renovation. Dear, we would have had to pay even more if it weren't for Ronald's help. Fate has sent us this person. I think we should have a housewarming and invite him and his spouse. By the way, he has a son." Mrs. Mary pursed her lips unhappily. "I'm not against it, of course, but I think your taxi driver will feel uncomfortable in the company of scholars." Mr. Dustin shot an angry glance towards his spouse. "There you go again. All right, I'll be quiet. Not another word. You can invite a janitor and a couple of homeless people who are always hanging around our entrance for the complete set." "You're incorrigible," the professor exclaimed in despair, waving his hand and hurrying to the hallway. He had lectures scheduled at the institute. In the first few days of their arrival, the family discussed how they would celebrate their housewarming. Initially, the head of the family wanted to limit it to a family dinner since they didn't know anyone in the city. However, in the professor's new circle of colleagues from the capital, they were welcomed with open arms, and many comrades didn't hesitate to ask a leading question: "When are you planning to celebrate your housewarming? We highly value such events as they allow us to integrate into the community right away." Similar traditions existed in their previous workplace, and Dustin had to include expenses for a banquet in his budget. After lengthy discussions, he and his spouse decided to celebrate the occasion right in their new apartment. But there was one problem that Mary wanted to solve immediately. "Dustin, everything is great except one thing. Who will prepare the treats for such a crowd? Can't you handle it yourself? I don't think we'll have too many guests, around 15 people, no more. And you expect me to stand by the stove for several days? No, I'm not ready to make such sacrifices." The man pondered, considering possible options. After a few seconds, he exclaimed happily, "Mary, I've got it. We'll order some dishes from a restaurant." "Dustin, do you know how much that idea will cost us?" "If we had known beforehand, we could have brought Kimberly," said the mother. "I think your suggestion is even worse than mine. Why bother the person?" Diana, who was silently observing them as usual, helped her parents. "Dad, I'm amazed at your inability to solve such a matter. We should ask someone in our building, preferably women, to help us. Then we wouldn't have to invite Kimberly. Or maybe Mom should handle the cooking herself," the professor happily suggested. "Well done, daughter. I even know who we can turn to. Ronald boasted that his wife cooks excellently. He told me she used to work in a cafe," the man said. Mrs. Mary froze. "So, first, they'll help us, and then they'll sit down to eat with everyone? I don't see anything wrong with that." Mary didn't like this option either, but due to a lack of alternatives, she had to agree. Carol herself wasn't inspired by this idea when her husband informed her about the upcoming housewarming of their new acquaintance. She remarked unhappily, "Ronald, I don't understand your attachment to this professor, and I don't like this plan. These people are not part of our social circle, and you shouldn't delude yourself into thinking you can fit into Dustin's company." Carol emphasized the professor's name with special emphasis, but the man tried to convince his wife otherwise. "You'll see for yourself that he's a decent guy without unnecessary ambitions." True, his other half, well, his wife, is a complete opposite. But she asked for help herself, so I think we shouldn't refuse these people. "All right, I'll help. It's not a problem, but we'll have to choose a housewarming gift. And that pleasure will cost us dearly. Don't forget that September 1st is coming up. And we need to buy new sneakers and a tracksuit for Willie. He's grown over the summer, and his foot has gotten bigger. Carol, I have some money saved up. We'll use that for our son, and I'll earn the money for the gift for the professor's family in a few shifts. We can give him a food processor or a microwave." "Ronald, have you gone mad? We don't even have such appliances in our own kitchen," Carol objected. But she gave in. However, Willie reacted negatively to his parents' demand that he accompany them to the housewarming. "Maybe you'll find it interesting with the professor, but I have my own things to do. Why do you dictate how I spend my free time?" he protested. "You see, I promised Mr. Dustin that we would all come together. They have a daughter named Diana who is a year younger than you. Maybe you'll befriend her. And besides, I think getting to know the professor might be useful for you in the future," Willie pondered. "Perhaps you're right, Dad. Okay, you convinced me. But remember, I'm not planning to hang around there all evening." Carol already felt uncomfortable from the first moments of being in the scientist's house. Willie's action further complicated the situation. The boy had somehow found a kitten and wanted to give it to the hosts as a housewarming gift. When the two hosts opened the door, he placed the living gift on the floor. Ronald was delighted. "Well done, Willie. It's a tradition. The cat will keep things in order and protect us from trouble." The kitten didn't wait for the owner's approval and began exploring the room impudently. The fluffy creature excited the professor's daughter, and she looked at the young man with admiration. "He's so cute." But Mrs. Mary didn't perceive the gift with the same enthusiasm. She struggled to contain herself and expressed her displeasure to the young man. "Why did you bring this stray cat here? It has fleas, and you can catch an infection from it." Diana immediately dropped the animal. The girl snorted, but she followed her mother's instructions. It's unclear how the incident would have ended if not for the intervention of the professor himself. Seeing the kitten, Dustin was overjoyed. "This is exactly what we were missing here. Come on in, buddy, you'll be the owner." The kitten looked at the professor, then approached him and rubbed against his leg. Carol was unaware of her son's plans. She had arrived at the scientist's family at 5 a.m. and immediately started preparing appetizers and hot dishes. When she heard the outraged cries from the hallway, she rushed out of the kitchen. It was easy to guess the cause of the commotion. Carol gave her son a stern look. You just had to stand out, didn't you? Mrs. Mary, don't worry, we'll fix everything right now. Give me that kitten. Diana grabbed the fluffy bundle and held it tightly. He's mine, and I won't let anyone hurt him. The professor's wife was accustomed to her daughter's complete obedience and was shocked by Diana's bold action. She tried to influence her daughter with gestures and glances, but the girl paid no attention to these signs. Instead, she bestowed Willie with a charming smile. Thank you, this is the best gift for me. Let's go, I'll show you my room. I have new CDs. How do you feel about hip-hop? Positively, ignoring the parents' reactions, the teenagers walked deeper into the apartment with the kitten. They stayed in Diana's room the whole evening and reluctantly joined the table when all the guests were present. According to Ronald, the scientist's housewarming went smoothly, but Carol had a different opinion. It was only the next day after the celebration that she confessed to her husband, "Throughout our time as guests, I felt awkward. I won't say anything bad about the professor, he's genuinely a very nice person. But Mary, honestly, she's awful. I wouldn't want to meet that person again. You know, while I was cooking, she reminded me every 5 minutes about their status compared to hers. I felt like a servant, I just wanted to get home as soon as possible." Ronald looked at his wife understandingly. I had similar feelings. Besides the hostess, some guests were also disapproving of us. So I completely agree with you that we shouldn't attend such events. Of course, we can maintain a connection with this family, but in a way that doesn't oblige us to anything. Unexpectedly, Willie spoke up. My dear parents, you should make up your minds about your preferences. First, you dragged me to this gathering by force, and now you scold yourselves for no apparent reason. Personally, I enjoyed everything, and that girl is cool. It's just a pity she won't be going to our school. Natural surprises no longer surprised many people, so the residents of the regional center perceived the mid-May heat as a regular occurrence rather than a climate anomaly. By 10 a.m., the sun was scorching, and pedestrians sought shelter in the shade, searching for cool spots, including Willie and Diana. However, all the benches in the park were occupied. The young man suggested, "Listen, Diana, do you see that small lawn near the fence over there? Let's go there, otherwise, our ice cream will soon turn into 2 little white puddles." Laughing, the girl agreed, "Although it's unusual, we don't have a choice." I can already imagine everyone staring at us and silently judging. Let them look. We're not planning on doing anything indecent in public, said Willie. Diana pushed him with all her strength. What are you implying? Willie barely kept his balance. I wasn't thinking about anything that goes beyond decency. Those kinds of thoughts only occur to you. Diana swung her purse again, but the young man dodged the blow. He effortlessly jumped over the shrub that stretched along the park path. Diana wanted to follow his example but remembered that she was wearing a short dress. Willie, that's not fair. We're not on equal footing, so I don't recognize your victory. The young man had already settled on the lawn and waved his hand to his girlfriend. I'm willing to concede to you. But while we discuss these trivialities, the ice cream will definitely melt. Diana sighed, it's already melting. Willie, get some wet wipes from your bag. We'll manage without wipes. Unexpectedly, the young man himself wiped the droplets of melted treat from her hand. The girl blushed and pulled her hand away. Look at how they're staring at us. Are we doing anything wrong? And by the way, Diana, I've been meaning to ask you, why are you so fearful? It's as if your parents aren't intellectuals but some kind of monsters. The girl let out a heavy sigh. You know, you're right about something. My dad is a wonderful person, and we understand each other perfectly. But my mom. Honestly, I'm afraid of her. She's been mocking me since childhood. I used to try to avoid her because she always found something to criticize. It's created so many complexes. I still can't get rid of them. You're not enviable. Although mishaps sometimes happen in my family too, it's not as severe. My mom is generally calm about my pranks. It's only my father who scolds me seriously. But to be fair, I'm not exactly a perfect child. My parents have endured a lot because of me. Diana finished her ice cream and now looked with interest at the people walking in the park. I haven't told anyone yet, but my most cherished dream is to get rid of my mom's control as soon as possible. She's fully immersed in my affairs and monitors everything, even my correspondence with friends. It's unbearable. Sometimes I feel like my mom is invading my mind and reading my thoughts. Wow, that's tough. I sympathize with you. For a while, the young couple remained silent. Each was lost in their own thoughts. The prolonged pause was broken by Willie. Diana, I apologize for the intrusive question, but it begs to be asked. Do your parents know that we're seeing each other? The girl jumped up and anxiously looked around again. If my mom finds out, she'll lock me up. So, all this time you've been hiding our relationship from them? Well, yes, I would leave home under the pretext of needing extra classes. So, it's like a detective novel between us? Why a detective novel? In old times, girls from noble families also secretly met their suitors. Diana didn't immediately realize that she had carelessly revealed the reason for her fears, but Willie sharply reacted to her confession. I see that your mother has drilled into your brain the theory of exceptionalism. Willie. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I just expressed myself poorly. But the mood of the boy had completely soured. Diana, don't apologize, you're not at fault. It's just that everything fell into place. I'm experiencing unpleasant feelings for the first time in my life. I can't describe them yet. Diana wanted to fix everything because she was afraid of losing her only friend. I shouldn't have said anything to you. He objected. No, you did the right thing. I need to know the truth. And besides, you're not just an acquaintance to me. Then who am I? Diana, don't you even realize that I really like you? The girl didn't respond, hastily picked up her purse, and headed towards the park exit. Willie hurried after her. Diana, you didn't answer me. She stopped and looked him in the eyes. Willie, you know perfectly well that you mean more to me than just a friend. In fact, I don't have anyone else I can fully trust. Only you. There's also Kimberly, but I haven't seen her in ages. So, I can't wait to meet her. They stepped out of the shadowy park alley, and the scorching midday heat attacked them with relentless fury. Diana grimaced. The heat is unbearable. Let's meet in the evening, all right? Just tell me right now what you meant when you mentioned Kimberly. The girl became flustered. I didn't want to tell you yet, but we're returning to the capital. They're begging my dad to come back to the university, and they're even offering him the position of rector. You understand, such offers are hard to refuse. And what about you? You're in your senior year. Diana sighed again. No one considers my wishes. I'll have to go back to that gymnasium or let my mom find another elite school for me. I'm already sick of her snobbery. Willie walked alongside his girlfriend in silence. The news that Diana was leaving didn't frighten him, but it didn't make him happy either. After a brief contemplation, the young man already knew what he would do next. We'll outsmart your mom, even if it takes everything we've got. Diana smiled. I wonder how you plan to do that. Very simple. I had a thought of applying to a local college, but now I've decided to try my luck in the capital. That way, I'll have the opportunity to be with you. Does my plan work for you? Absolutely. Just the thought of you being somewhere nearby warms me up. The girl's kiss returned a positive mood to the guy, and he optimistically declared, we'll be able to call each other or stay in touch through social media. Nowadays, it's easy to communicate online in a way that even professionals won't be able to uncover, let alone your mom. Willie, you don't know my mom well. You can't even imagine what she's capable of. On that May day, the boy least wanted to think about Mrs. Mary after the frank conversation with his beloved. He was already working out a new plan for his future in his head. Willie's parents took the news of their son going to the capital calmly. Ronald even approved of the decision. "And you're doing the right thing." The boy smirked and corrected his father. "Dad, the sea doesn't attract me. I have completely different goals. I'm not up to date with the latest changes, but I remember not long ago you dreamed of becoming a banker. By the way, our acquaintance, the professor, is returning to his university. Now he'll be the head there. So, you can benefit from a useful connection." "No, Dad, that's out of the question. I don't need anyone's patronage. Besides, I want to apply to a completely different university." Ronald sat down and stared at his son. "All right, tell your father where you've decided to go then." "I want to become a geologist, and I'll be applying to the University of Geodesy and Cartography." The father was clearly disappointed with his son's decision. "What kind of profession have you chosen? It's not popular nowadays." "You're mistaken, Dad. A person's life depends a lot on the wealth of the Earth's resources. Trust me, in about 10 years, there will be an intensified struggle for natural resources in the world." Ronald grimaced. "I didn't need my son to give me a lecture. I know just as well as you what's in demand these days. I won't argue with you. Since you've chosen geology, go and study. Just be careful not to regret your decision." Willie didn't reply to his father and walked into the kitchen, where his mother was busy at the stove. Without turning around, the woman asked, "Willie, is your decision related to Diana's departure? After all, you two are dating." It was impossible to escape his mother's gaze. "And how do you know everything?" "Don't forget where I work, son. I regularly hear about your dates." "I assume Diana's parents don't know anything?" "They don't know." Carol shook her head. "See for yourself, son. Diana is a good girl, but her mother. I don't think she'll be thrilled when she finds out about your friendship." The boy's face grew as dark as a cloud. "Mom. Let's not go back to this topic anymore." "All right," Carol cast a sad glance at her son. "All right, I'll keep quiet. But you should think about it seriously. Love. It's a complicated thing. At first, it burns bright like a flame, and then suddenly goes out, leaving only ashes." A woman poured a full plate of soup and placed it in front of her son. She sat across from him, taking a moment to rest. Carol admired her son and, at the same time, sadly thought about how he had grown up without her noticing. "Did his father and I miss out on our son's interests?" she asked her husband late in the evening. He pondered for a while but gave an indefinite answer. "Can we really predict what youth love will lead to? Maybe it's all just a fling for them? Diana will go to the capital, and their immature love will be forgotten." They remained silent for a while, and then Carol sighed. "I hope you're right. But it's still scary." The man stayed silent for a while Carol sighed next to him. The atmosphere was conducive to an honest conversation, and Ronald voiced aloud what had been troubling him lately for the first time. "I'm worried about Willie. He's impulsive. If he doesn't like something, he can cause trouble." "Ronald, you know that not all thoughts should be spoken out loud, right?" "It's better to think about the good," Carol replied. "Carol. How can I think about the good when our son's future is at stake? Yes, nothing has happened yet. But if he continues to see this Diana, something bad will happen. Just wait, Ronald, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe he'll meet another girl and forget about Diana. After all, there's nothing special about her. I don't understand what attracted him to her. I would also like to know that. And you're right, maybe he'll meet another girl from a normal family." Ronald wanted to add a few more pleasant words, but a minute later, he was already snoring loudly. Willie also had trouble falling asleep that night, but his thoughts were occupied by entirely different things. He was thinking about his future, and his imagination presented him with beautiful pictures of a happy life. And in every scene, Diana was by his side. It's known that teenage fantasies rarely come true in their dreamlike form. Willie envisioned a different existence in the capital. During the first 2 years of his studies, he didn't live He merely existed because the institute had a very demanding schedule. The rector himself lectured on their faculty, and almost every time he concluded with, "Remember, friends, not everyone will reach the finals. Only the strongest and most responsible will overcome the difficulties and receive a diploma from our university." The rector's speech was monotonous, and Willie shook himself to shake off drowsiness. His friend, Ted, humorously remarked, "You're kicking like a horse in the stable." Willie looked at his comrade with interest. "I'm telling you, they're testing us, or rather, using psychological methods of influence. If you want, we can talk about it after classes. There are many convenient spots on campus where we can have a quiet conversation." They agreed to meet. It turned out that Ted also lived in the same dormitory, just on the 5th floor. When they met at the appointed time, the new friend, without hesitation, offered Willie, "Have you already found yourself a girlfriend? If there's a gap in that area, I can help you." "Thanks, Ted, but there's no need to trouble yourself. I already have a girlfriend, we just don't have the opportunity to meet often." "And who is your sweetheart?" "She's an ordinary girl. Although I lied a bit. Her father is a professor, currently heading one of the capital's universities. And Diana herself, that's my girlfriend's name, will be entering university only this year." Ted looked at Willie with an evaluating gaze. Wow, you hit the jackpot, Willie. Sorry, but you remind me of a naive hero from a Mexican soap opera. My mother loves those melodramas and weeps over the fate of the unfortunate characters. I had to watch a few episodes of such a series when I was at home with a broken leg. There was this guy, like a shepherd in the movie, who fell in love with the owner's daughter, and what happened? Well, nothing, love didn't work out. The girl's father separated them. In short, the movie is complete nonsense, but it's instructive. That's why I try to stay away from such high society girls. You know, there was another glamorous girl who tried to flirt with me in my first year, but after 2 dates, I lost all interest in her. The young men talked a little more about life and went to their rooms. Willie himself understood that city life was not at all what he had imagined. Over the past year and a half, he had only met Diana a few times. True, the lack of personal communication was compensated by almost daily phone conversations. But the young man reassured himself, "It's okay, everything will work out in time. We are destined to be together anyway." But days passed, and this confidence began to slowly fade away. One day, Diana called him not in the evening, as usual, but early in the morning. Willie was getting ready for the institute and was very surprised by this early call. So, with concern, he asked the girl, "Diana, is something wrong with you?" The sound of girlish laughter echoed through the phone. Something's happened. My parents decided to take a vacation. They got a 10-day trip to the seaside. Mom says Dad needs to improve his health, and she can't let him go alone. Great. That means we can meet and go somewhere. Yeah, I can even offer you a stay at our country house. And you'll get to meet my Kimberly. After that conversation, Willie felt the urge to do something extraordinary. He spun around the room in an inexplicable dance, which surprised his roommates. Are you okay? Should we call an ambulance? No, guys. Medicine is powerless in my case. Watch out, don't infect us. They say rabies is transmitted through airborne droplets. Don't worry, friends. I don't have a dangerous infection. It's just that my beloved girlfriend called me. One of the friends gave him a sidelong glance. I get calls from girls like 10 times a day, but I don't climb the walls. Willie didn't bother explaining his state any further and headed to the university. Ted was already waiting for him there. Willie, do you know that we have a business project competition starting at our institute? No. This is the first I'm hearing from you. I just found out today too. The winners will receive a significant grant to implement their idea. You're the smartest and most capable person in our faculty. Don't you want to participate? Ted, you don't give me a chance to breathe. We need to find out all the rules and requirements first. Serious matters like these can't be decided in a minute. Willie, think about it, and if anything, don't forget about me. Maybe you'll agree to be my good partner? Ted, I will definitely think about it, but not right now. In the following days, the young man couldn't think about anything else because his thoughts were occupied by the upcoming date. Willie immediately liked Kimberly. This woman reminded him of his mother in some way. She spent the whole evening fussing around them, offering various treats. Diana, I baked your favorite cupcakes. Treat your friend. The girl didn't hide that she appreciated the care of the housekeeper. It was evident that she felt comfortable in the countryside house. She confirmed this suspicion herself. Willie, I love coming here more than anything in the world. Of course, I mean trips without my mother's company. The young man inquired, will your Kimberly not tell anyone about us? I can hardly imagine what would happen if Mrs. Mary finds out about our secret meetings. She won't find out. Kimberly won't say anything. She'll never betray me because I'm like a daughter to her. If it weren't for her, I would have died of loneliness a long time ago. They spent 2 wonderful days at the country house and returned to the city on Sunday evening. Diana looked straight into his eyes as they said, "Goodbye." Willie, did you like my idea? You didn't even have to ask. I think by my satisfied expression, it's easy to guess the impression our secret date made on me. I'll try to organize another one just like it. The young man looked at his friend in surprise. But what about your mother's surveillance? I'll come up with something. The girl kept her promise. Although meetings at her parents' country house were infrequent, usually in late autumn or winter. For over 2 years, the young couple secretly met at the countryside house. But both of them knew that it couldn't go on like that for much longer. Willie decided to put an end to the secret rendezvous. He mentioned it during their next meeting. Diana, we need to have a serious talk. I'm ready to listen to you endlessly. Diana, I'm serious, and you turn everything into a game. Willie. You're confusing me. I wanted to talk to you about serious matters. The girl fell silent. I'm listening to you. Diana, we've been together for so many years, and I think it's time for us to take our relationship to the next level. We can't keep hiding from your mother indefinitely. We are adults and have the right to decide our own fate. So, are you saying that we should get married? Well, yes. Why prolong it further? No, I'm not rushing you. Think about it. I'm leaving soon. For 2 months. Where are you going? Remember, I told you about the business project competition? I remember, you were planning to participate in it. Yes, Ted and I developed a non-conventional idea and submitted our project out of curiosity. I couldn't even imagine that our work would win the grand prize. And now what? In short, we need to start implementing this plan. According to the competition terms, we received the funds, and we can only spend them on the project. Ted and I found a sponsor who promised to help. Willie, what if he deceives you? That's not possible. Everything is very clear there, and every penny will be accounted for. It's a shame you're leaving. I'll only be gone for 2 months. And anyway, before I leave, we'll have time to discuss everything. But for now, please accept this from me. Willie took out a velvet box from his shirt pocket. He opened the lid, revealing a small sparkling gem. I'm sorry it's not a diamond, but when I start earning well, I'll buy you the most expensive ring. Diana tried on the gift. It's lovely. Willie, I don't need time. I'm telling you right now that I agree. I'll wait for you. That night, the lovers spent sleepless. They experienced what both had been eagerly and anxiously waiting for. For the first time, they dreamt about the future together. And, of course, children were part of those plans. As dawn approached and both were exhausted from the sleepless night, Diana asked, Dash, what if we have a child? What will we name him? Dash, I haven't thought about that yet. For a boy, we could name him Max or Alex. Dash, and if it's a girl? Dash, oh, I really don't know any girl names. Although. Wait. I had a friend in kindergarten. She had such an unusual name, Teresa. She was a very kind girl, always sharing her toys with me, but then she went somewhere. And I still remember that charming girl. Willie turned and kissed his beloved. You resembled that girl in some way. And the name Teresa has something ethereal about it. Dash, if I'm not mistaken, it means golden or a precious thought. A week later, they met again, but their date was short-lived. Willie immediately noticed that Diana was upset. Dash, today, you don't seem like yourself. Dash, no wonder. Yesterday, my parents announced that we'll have guests, and my presence is mandatory. So, I'm sorry, but we'll have to postpone our date. Dash, Diana, I'm leaving in 2 days. Dash, well, you'll come back, right? Dash, of course. He took her hand and asked with surprise, Dash, aren't you wearing the gift I gave you? Diana blushed and looked away. Dash, please don't be offended. You know that if my parents see it, they'll start asking questions. Dash, yes, I understand, Willie replied. They parted ways, leaving some unspoken words between them. Willie thought bitterly, she didn't even ask where I'm going. But he didn't want to dwell on the negative. The hopes associated with the project implementation helped him stay positive. Throughout the journey, he and Ted discussed the prospects that lay ahead. Mary absent-mindedly twisted the inexpensive ring with a cubic zirconia. She accidentally found it in her daughter's makeup bag while searching for lip balm. In her youth, the woman suffered from dry lips in winter and solved the problem with a tried-and-true remedy. Diana was not a fan of jewelry, she only wore a delicate necklace with a cross. Mary had never seen this ring before. I wonder where she got it from. Diana never appreciated cheap costume jewelry. Diana was taking a shower, and the woman decided to ask her daughter about it later when she came out of the bathroom. Suddenly, a thought pricked her mind, and Mrs. Mary rushed to her daughter's laptop. The device was on but in sleep mode. Although the professor's wife wasn't well versed in such technology, she could navigate at a user level. She clicked a key, and her daughter's social media page opened immediately. Mrs. Mary couldn't believe her eyes as she read the conversation between Diana and someone named Willie. She strained her memory. Dash, Willie? Maybe he's her classmate? At the other end of the apartment, the door slammed shut, followed by the sound of her daughter's footsteps. Mrs. Mary shut down the laptop and put the ring back in the makeup bag. The girl entered the room and asked in confusion, Dash, Mom, were you? Dash, I was looking for lip balm. I hope you don't mind that I intruded into your room without permission? Dash, no, Mom, it's okay, the girl replied. She glanced at the laptop but didn't say anything. Leaving the room, Mrs. Mary couldn't stop thinking about the ring. The male name was also bothering her. It was only at night that she remembered the taxi driver's son who had given them a kitten as a housewarming gift. This discovery was so unexpected that the woman jumped out of bed. Dustin asked discontentedly, Mary, why did you jump out of bed like that? There's a reason. You're sleeping, but our daughter might be in trouble. Darling, let's leave the problems until morning. I have lectures tomorrow morning. I need to get some rest. But I need to go to the country house urgently. Mary herself didn't know why the thought of going to the country house came to her. Perhaps her intuition told her that all the answers should be sought there. Mary. Look at the time. Can't you wait until morning? If you're so eager to go to the country house, I'll ask my driver. He can take you there tomorrow. I'll go there myself in the morning. Can you at least tell me briefly why it's so urgent? Dustin, I don't know yet, but I have a bad feeling. Everything needs to be clarified. All right, go and find out. The man lay back in bed, but he couldn't fall asleep because his wife asked him, "Dustin, do you remember Ronald, the son of that taxi driver?" "Of course, I remember. I think he's studying here in the capital. Although I haven't met him, his father called me a long time ago, and we had a brief conversation." The woman sighed heavily. "So, he's here? Now many things make sense to me." "What exactly?" "Please, don't speak in riddles." "All right, I'll tell you plainly. Remember when you invited the graduate student over?" "Of course, I remember. It's been less than 2 weeks. He's a nice guy. It's just a shame that Diana didn't like him." Mrs. Mary became animated. "That's exactly it. A pleasant young man, educated. You said his parents are also professors?" "No, only the mother. The father is a well-known businessman." "What a profitable match." "Mary, get rid of your stereotypes. You know very well that love cannot be controlled. Honestly, I invited him over with intention. I was also thinking about our daughter's future. Apparently, the time hasn't come yet." "You're wrong. Our daughter just found someone else. And I don't even want to think about how far it has gone." Mr. Dustin sat back on the bed. "And who is this other person?" "I'm not sure yet. But it seems like he's the son of your taxi driver. If our acquaintances find out, they'll mock us. The daughter of a professor getting involved with the son of a taxi driver and a shoe store saleswoman." The man was also taken aback by this assumption. Although he had always reproached his wife in the past when she started discussing unequal marriages, this time he remained silent. The spouses spent about an hour in confusion, then Mr. Dustin began to hurry to get ready. "I'll go with you." "No, Dustin, I'll handle it myself. You go back to sleep." The man exclaimed, "Mary. What sleep? You have no idea what thoughts are running through my head." "I have a very good idea. I'm in complete shock myself. Imagine, I reached for my lipstick and found the ring. And then I visited her social media page and found out that our daughter is getting married. And she did all this secretly from us. But it's fine. I'll expose them." Mr. Dustin quietly asked Mary, "But maybe we shouldn't interfere? Diana is already 21 years old. Let her make her own decisions in life." "No way. As long as I'm alive, I won't let her marry the son of a taxi driver." An hour later, Mrs. Mary was already at the cottage settlement. The housekeeper was surprised by the unexpected arrival of the mistress. "Why didn't you inform us in advance?" "I decided to surprise you." "Why did you rush here so early?" "Kimberly, are you being rude to me? I had a better opinion of you. And you betrayed me." The housekeeper widened her eyes. "I don't understand. What are you accusing me of?" "Kimberly, let go of these sentiments, they're pointless right now. Instead, tell me, were there any young couples here or not?" The housekeeper's face flushed, and she nervously played with her apron. Her behavior without words proved that Mary hit the mark. "Tell me, Kimberly, everything as it is." "Of course, unless you want to lose your job." The housekeeper, stumbling, explained how the mistress's daughter was meeting a pleasant young man at the cottage. She only kept silent about the fact that she had left them alone during their last meeting. After Mary's questioning, she burst into tears. But her tears seemed more theatrical than sincere. "Kimberly, I trusted you. You had a good salary, and you betrayed my husband and me. I hope you understand that after everything that has happened, you cannot stay in this house." The housekeeper, exhausted, slumped onto the table. "But you promised you wouldn't fire me if I told everything," she said. "See how unpleasant it is when you are deceived. Now you understand me. I'll wait for you to gather your things, and please hand over all the keys." Kimberly took 10 minutes to collect her personal belongings. She lived in the same settlement, so she only kept work equipment in the house, bought with her own money. The housekeeper didn't even say goodbye to the mistress. Instead, she slammed the door loudly. Mrs. Mary couldn't help but act as if she was offended. Let her show her character somewhere else. I won't grovel at her feet and beg her to stay. Although the housekeeper had slightly spoiled Mary's mood, she was satisfied with her actions. Now she knew how to corner her defiant daughter, but for the next step, she needed the help of a professional. A few days passed. One evening, Mrs. Mary heard her daughter crying in her room. "Diana, may I come in?" "Yes, Mom, come in." The girl turned her face away, trying to hide her tears, but her mother understood that she wanted to conceal them from her. She sat down next to her daughter and gently stroked her back. "What's wrong with you?" Diana tried to hold back her sobbing, but she couldn't manage it. Tears prevented her from speaking, and she turned the laptop towards her mother. "Read. I believed in him, almost turned my back on my parents, and he..." The girl buried her face in the pillow, so she didn't notice the triumphant smile on her mother's face. She read a short message addressed to her daughter. "Diana, I'm sorry, but during the expedition, I met a girl without whom I can't live or breathe now. Let the ring I gave you remain as a memory of our love." Feigning surprise, Mrs. Mary asked, "Sweetie, who is this scoundrel? Who dared to hurt you?" The crying didn't stop. "It's Willie. Remember, that boy who brought us a kitten at the housewarming party? Well, he's the son of a taxi driver." "Of course, I remember him, but I had no idea that you were seeing each other. And how far did your relationship go?" The sobbing ceased. "Very far, Mom. I'm going to have a baby, and now I don't know what to do." Mrs. Mary froze in horror. It became difficult for her to breathe, and she rushed to the kitchen. There she drank a glass of water in one gulp. The thought spun in her head, "What have I done?" Her inner voice immediately reassured her, "But you knew that your daughter's relationship with this guy had gone so far. If the pregnancy is still in the early stages, as Kimberly's account and Diana's story suggest, then everything can be fixed." She returned to the room and started to calm her daughter. "Everything will work out, sweetheart. You're not alone in this world. You have your mom and dad. We can take care of getting rid of the baby." The girl jumped up. Her appearance frightened her mother. "Don't you dare say those words to me, Mom. I would never consider such a thing." "Okay, just don't be upset. We can sort everything out without unnecessary sacrifices." Diana looked her mother straight in the eyes. "Do you want me to marry that same doctoral student of Dad's?" "Fine, I agree." To help her daughter regain some health, Mrs. Mary sent her to rest by the sea. The girl went to the resort with her future husband. Meanwhile, Willie had just returned from his expedition. When Mary called him, Willie didn't immediately realize he was speaking to Diana's mother. The woman was crying and begged him to come over as soon as possible. As soon as he crossed the threshold of the apartment, an unpleasant scent of a mixture of incense and some herb hit his nose. Mrs. Mary was in mourning. Willie became frightened. Did Mr. Dustin pass away? The woman pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. No, our Diana, our only daughter, is gone. I don't know how we'll go on living. Willie's head started spinning. He leaned against the wall. When did this happen? We were exchanging messages a few weeks ago. Diana disappeared and stopped responding to me. Mrs. Mary led the guest to the large room and pointed to a beautiful vase with a golden inscription. There's everything that's left of our girl. We couldn't even bury her properly. That monster hit her and then fled. Oh God, how can we survive this grief? The woman started crying. Willie was crushed by this news, as if by a stone slab. He didn't know what to do. The girl's mother handed him the ring. Here's your gift. Let this ring remain with you as a memory of my daughter. Willie hadn't fully grasped the depth of the sorrow that had befallen him. He wanted to ask the woman for more details about the accident, but Mrs. Mary rolled her eyes and clutched her chest. Please, leave me alone. I can't talk anymore. I feel very ill. The young man was bewildered. He quietly closed the door behind him and went to his friend Ted. Ted greeted him with surprise. I don't understand something. Judging by your expression, your Diana wasn't very thrilled about your success. Willie slumped onto a chair and asked, Do you have something to drink? Something strong. Ted sat down on a chair himself. Willie had always been a staunch opponent of drinking. He never ceased to repeat that a smart person couldn't want to make themselves dull, even temporarily. He said it was just a waste of time during which one could do a lot of interesting things. And now Willie was asking for a drink. Yeah, somewhere around here. Just a moment. Ted placed half a bottle on the table. They had had a very productive 2 months. Their project not only succeeded but also gained immediate popularity. The sponsor who funded the project as part of university assistance became seriously interested. He spent the last 2 weeks with them. By the time they needed to leave, he said, You know, I've seen many young people. But what you guys have come up with is like a reverse game. You do everything the opposite way, completely against the norm. And the result is astounding. I've heard of such business approaches, but to witness it. I have a proposal for you. This businessman offered to further develop the project, but not as part of a competition, rather as an independent business. I'm willing to invest in the development, a substantial amount actually. Of course, I'll do it for a certain percentage that I'll receive later. I have enough of my own money, to be honest. My business is running fine, but this would not only be profitable but also quite interesting. Willie immediately asked what would happen if the business failed at some point. The businessman smirked. You're smart. We need to discuss all the details up front. Nothing will happen. We'll sell everything we have and go our separate ways. In principle, the amount lost won't be significant for me. But we're still studying. Everything will be arranged. We'll draw up a contract. The man smiled again. Of course, more than that, we can work on the contract together and then have our lawyers review it. We agree. And what about our studies? Willie turned to Ted. We'll switch to distance learning. The successful guys returned to settle all the formalities. Willie wanted to inform his parents about Diana. He wanted her to go with him. He had been dreaming about it because he hadn't been dreaming about anything else. And he was prepared for the resistance he would face from his parents. They would have to figure things out with their studies. They would have to figure out so many things. But he was ready. But he wasn't ready for this. He simply didn't expect it. Ted stood up. Willie, you look terrifying. What happened? Did she reject you? But it's only been half an hour since you left. Willie silently placed the ring on the table and poured himself another drink. Is this the ring you gave her? She rejected you. Willie smiled wryly. You could say that. She died. What? Ted fell back onto his chair. She got hit by a car. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Willie stood up, only to collapse onto his bed 3 minutes later. The sponsor was quite pleased. I have a feeling that great things await us. They just signed the documents. Willie became the head of the company, Ted became his deputy, and the same sponsor became the founder, albeit temporarily. Everyone was satisfied. The guys were capable. And experienced. The businessman actually invested the minimum amount he could. Willie planned to work so that he could forget everything that had happened. 5 years passed. Willie, your mom is calling. He picked up the phone. Hey, Mom. Hello, Willie. I hope nothing has changed for you. Guests will be coming, too. No, Mom, nothing has changed. We'll celebrate your and Dad's 30th anniversary with the whole gang. Oh, Willie, I'm so worried. We've never been to restaurants before. Is it worth starting at this age? We could just stay at home and do everything as usual. No way, Mom. Do you want to spend the whole day standing at the stove and then sit tired at the table? Carol laughed. It's nothing to worry about. Ever since you told me to quit my job, I've been bored out of my mind. You know, I sometimes miss my shoes and boots. Talking to people, giving advice, seeing what makes someone happy, it brings joy to myself as well. But now I just brush off the dust and watch my TV shows. Dad at least tinkers with his car in the garage, assembling and disassembling it. It makes him feel better too. Just don't tell him that I revealed his secret. Sometimes he still works a couple of hours as a taxi driver. He comes back happy. Oh, how I wanted you both to relax. Willie felt upset. 3 years ago, he convinced his parents to stop working. He said he would provide for them from now on. The first thing he did was buy them a new apartment. Then he acquired a garage for his father. He wanted to buy him a new car, but his father resisted. Why do I need a new car? Just to blow off the dust? Or to take your mother to the market? She doesn't ride with me. She says she wants to go for a walk and interact with people. But in my car, I always find something to fix. It's some kind of entertainment. They didn't want to hurt their son and didn't tell him that without work, they simply didn't know how to live, where to rush, what to do. Ronald was wary of his son's sudden rise. There were no rich people in their family lineage. He even expressed all his concerns to his son during one of his rare visits. Willie, tell me, what's the probability that you will go bankrupt at some point? I watch the news, and one bank after another goes bankrupt. And here you are, giving us such gifts. Willie smiled cheerfully. Dad, don't worry. The probability is 0. Ronald was getting heated. But why do others run their businesses for many years and then lose everything in an instant? Exactly because they've been running them for so many years. They're used to working the way they were taught. But now it's a different time. Firstly, you need to think. Secondly, you need to think in a way that nobody else does. And thirdly, the direction of my business is such that not everyone will be able to understand it. Everyone only sees the results. Once again, Ronald didn't understand how he ended up with such a smart son. One day he cornered Carol. Tell me, just be honest with me. Don't be afraid, because it's been so many years. Did you cheat on me when we were young? We've lived so many years together, and now you decide to ask me such questions? Ronald tried his best to dodge the question. He already realized that he had asked something foolish. They argued and debated constantly, but they loved each other and got married out of love. I just can't understand, but who is Willie taking after? He's so smart. You're a fool, Ronald. Any other father would be proud of his son, but you always find reasons to doubt. From that day on, Ronald never brought up the topic again. Willie hung up the phone. Well, it's time to keep my childhood promises. He had a week in reserve, and he had to make it happen. His secretary immediately appeared in the office. She stood upright, holding her notepad ready. Willie was always amazed at how she didn't get tired of being under such tension. May I ask a question? The girl looked at him. Yes, of course. Do they teach you to stand like that, all stretched out, in secretary courses? The girl snorted and relaxed a bit. No, of course not. I just did ballet for 10 years. That's why I got used to stretching. Ballet? Willie's eyebrows shot up. Wow. I've never seen real ballerinas. You said you used to do it, so you don't do it anymore? Yes, as soon as I could, I quit. I hated it my whole life, she explained when she saw his gaze. My mother made me do it. She thought it was very prestigious. Willie smiled understandingly. The older he became, the more he met those whom their mothers forced into something. The door opened, and Ted walked in. "Oh, you're here too." Willie looked at Ted with interest. It seemed like he didn't know something. Ted took the girl's hand. "Willie, we're friends, and I think you'll understand me." "Well, I've decided to leave. You've taught me a lot, but I want to do it on my own. I hope you understand. This company is yours, and it only exists because of you. We both know that. So, I'm not claiming anything. Don't even think about it. I've saved up some money. I think it's enough for us to start something on our own." Willie was at a loss. Ted wants to leave him. But then he looked at the secretary's face. She was looking at his friend with such admiration, even reverence. Diana used to look at him the same way. He stood up. "Yes, Ted. You never cease to amaze me. I won't hold you back, of course. I'll transfer some money to your account to make sure you have enough. Just please wait a little. My parents have their wedding anniversary in a week. I'd like to go away for a week." "Sure, Willie. And I have some things to wrap up here. So go ahead, and don't worry about a thing." "Well then, guys, I need some more help. You see, when I was younger but already ambitious, I made a certain promise to my parents. I don't know, I'm not sure if they still remember it. Well, I've decided to fulfill what I promised. Though, I have very little time. But if you help me." Ted smiled, pulled out a chair for his future bride, and sat down himself. "Tell us the story first, and then we'll see if we can do it or not." They held a meeting for a long time. The secretary made coffee several times, and by nightfall, as they started to disperse, she added, "I wish my son would treat me the same way when he grows up." Ted laughed. "First, you have to give birth to that very son." The girl immediately made a hurt face. Willie had been on the road for over 5 hours. He was almost constantly on the phone. In his hometown, the final preparations for the surprise were underway. He wasn't sure if it was as secret as he wanted it to be because small towns are like big villages. But he hoped for the best. He turned into the yard in the evening and immediately saw his mother and father. They were sitting on a bench near the children's gazebo, waiting for him. "Son, are you alone? Didn't you bring anyone with you?" Willie sighed. Lately, his mother had been bringing up this conversation more often. But what could he do if he still loved Diana? Yes, he understood she wasn't there. But in his heart, Diana was always alive. "Mom, I'm still young. Everything will come." Carol sighed. She understood everything, of course. She knew how her son was going through, how he worked tirelessly just to forget a little. So Carol changed the subject. "It seems like we have a new businessman in our town. Where did you get that idea? And you're talking in riddles. In our town, I think this businessman would have been exposed before he decided to come here." "No, nobody knows anything. He opened a new store. It's so beautiful. And all the shoes there are expensive. Well, the grand opening hasn't happened yet, but it seems like it will be soon. The thing is, I don't want to stay at home anymore. I can't stand it. And there, they have good conditions, and the work isn't dusty." "Mom, is it because you don't have enough money?" "It's not about money. You see, I want to feel needed. When grandchildren come, I'll take care of them. But right now, I can't just sit at home and watch TV shows." Carol supported her husband. "Yes, we're not that old. I'll be covered in dust soon. Yesterday, I saw new taxi cars, and they were all the same. Maybe some new park is opening." "Well, what should I do with you?" "All right, we have a celebration tomorrow, we'll talk later. I'm going to bed." Willie looked at his mother and didn't recognize her. "Mom, honestly, you're around 35, not more." Carol smiled awkwardly. "You can say the same. The salon girls did their best. And your father, look at him too, not bad, a good-looking man. Make sure they don't take him away. Ronald chuckled and immediately received a noticeable poke in the ribs. All right, shall we go? Carol looked at her watch. So early? Seems like the right time. We still need to stop by somewhere. They parked near the shoe store. Here, Willie, look, this is the very store. Well, let's go, let's see what it's like. They got out of the car and headed towards the store. Inside, it was beautiful and quiet. Two young saleswomen were arranging shoes in the display cases. Carol looked around. Oh my, it even smells familiar. How many years I sold these boots? She smiled. Look, do you see? The girl is putting small sizes on the top shelf. But that's not how it should be done. People with small feet usually have a small height. Not everyone will ask the salesperson for help to take them down, and they'll just go to another store. Mom, just tell them about it. What? Do you think I'm going to announce who I am here? Who are you? Are you the owner of this store? Here are all the documents. It's my gift to you, remember? I promised you and Dad. Carol stopped smiling. Son, are you joking? No, Mom. Here, take the papers. Ronald frowned. He simply couldn't understand how it was possible to give an entire store as a gift. Willie had promised his father to give him a taxi fleet. After half an hour, they stopped near a hangar. It was on the outskirts, large but long abandoned. Now it gleamed with renovations and new gates. Willie clenched his fingers. Dad, let's go. What's there? You'll see soon enough. Willie opened the gates. Ronald froze. Inside, there were about 15 identical cars. Two mechanics were bustling in the far corner, fitting plates onto the cars. I think you'll handle the staff yourself. Who else but you would know? The celebration turned out to be a bit chaotic. Willie couldn't leave his parents alone because they were so overwhelmed. He scolded himself. He should have prepared them somehow. When Willie returned home, he immediately felt lonely. Ted and his fiancée had left, promising to write, call, and invite him over. Somehow, they had decided to go to the other side of the world, and now Willie felt the full weight of his solitude. After another workday that resembled all the others, he went outside and decided to walk. He lived in the capital, and from time to time, an investor would visit him. It was this investor who helped with this building. Willie walked and thought about his direction when suddenly he stopped. Before him was the same park where he and Diana used to go all the time. They would eat ice cream there and often prepare for their classes. He closed his eyes and then took a determined step forward. How long could he run away from himself? The park had changed. The trees had grown taller, the bushes had changed shape. Apparently, the previous style was considered outdated. He sat on a bench and stayed there for a while. There were hardly any people around. It was autumn. In the distance, his mother was walking along the path. A little girl ran beside her. A little further, an elderly couple strolled. These were all the park visitors at this time. Willie stood up and slowly walked on the rustling leaves. So many memories were lived here. The girl ran towards him. At first, Willie didn't understand what was happening, but then he saw a balloon being gently carried towards him by the wind. The girl was very young, maybe around 4 or 5 years old. Her little legs were struggling to accomplish the task. The balloon was getting closer to him, and he couldn't just ignore the child. Willie grabbed the balloon by its long string and stopped, waiting for the child to reach him. A few meters away from him, the girl tripped and fell. Willie could even feel the pain himself. She crashed down and started crying. Her mother was still far away, and the man rushed to the child, picked her up, and handed her the balloon. Don't cry, please, here you go. Only now did he notice that the balloon had the name Teresa written on it. His palms immediately became sweaty. "Is your name Teresa?" "Yes. Today I turn 5. Willie felt his heart pounding. It was exactly the name he and Diana had planned to give their daughter, and the little girl, so resembling Diana, was looking at him. But how was that possible? "Thank you," he said. "Well, why did you have to be so careless?" Willie was afraid to move. He slowly straightened up. "Diana, you died." Diana stood before him. His Diana. She looked at him with a surprised expression. The trip to the seaside had not gone well. The potential husband initially tried to show her attention, but when he realized there would be no reciprocal reaction, he turned his attention to more compliant girls. One night, he came to her room drunk, trying to get what he wanted, but he received such a rebuff that he had to go to the infirmary. He reproached her, saying, "I don't understand what's wrong with you. If you don't like me at all, why did you come with me to the seaside?" Diana, who had regretted it 1,000 times already, replied, "Didn't they inform you? I'm pregnant, and I urgently need to marry someone." The man's mouth dropped open. Diana had to cover it with her palm, or it might never close. Then she left. The next day, when she returned, there was a very significant and unpleasant conversation with her parents. Mrs. Mary was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Mr. Dustin remained mostly silent. Finally, when his wife was on her second bottle of sedatives, and Diana had run out of tears, he said, "That's enough. Honestly, I don't quite understand what all the fuss is about. If she doesn't want to marry him, then she doesn't have to. But I won't allow her to parade around here with her belly. You'll go live in the country house. You can bring Kimberly back." He saw that Mrs. Mary wanted to say something, but he pounded his fist on the table. "That's it, I've said it. I won't let a child suffer because of your foolishness." It was so unlike him that both women immediately fell silent. The next day, Diana left for the country house. It must be said that she did it with great pleasure. Kimberly seemed to have even become younger. And when Teresa was born, Mrs. Mary doted on the girl and constantly tried to persuade Diana to return to the city. Diana was resolute. She found remote work and earned a good income, but at night, she cried into her pillow, remembering Willie. Teresa fell silent, looking at the adults. The air was tense. "Willie, what a good excuse. But don't you care if I'm alive or not? You met your love on the expedition." "What? What love? What expedition?" "Diana. What's happening? Don't you understand that it's not possible? I nearly went crazy mourning you." He yelled, and Teresa started crying. Diana picked her up. "Shh, my girl. Uncle just doesn't understand what he's saying." She turned to him. "Stop screaming like a madman." "You scared the child," she shrugged. "I don't understand what you're talking about. You wrote to me yourself that you met the love of your life." "I couldn't have written that to you because it's not true. One day, you just disappeared and stopped responding to me." Willie spoke in a dead voice. "After I returned, your mother invited me to your house. She cried, showed me your photo in a black frame, and told me how some bad person hit you with a car." Diana suddenly looked at him, horror frozen in her eyes. "Mom? No. This can't be. A person can't be so cruel." "She gave me this." Willie took out the same ring he had worn on a chain around his neck. Diana touched it with her fingers. "I've been searching for it like crazy." They stood there in silence. Then Willie reached out and gently touched Diana's cheek. "You're real. I can't believe it." A tear rolled down his cheek, and Diana fell into his chest. He embraced her and Teresa, closing his eyes. "Oh Lord, please. Let this be forever." Teresa had long fallen asleep in his arms. They walked through the park for the second time, endlessly telling each other something. Diana, do you even understand that I will never let you go again? Not for a single step. The woman smiled. And I won't let you go. We missed you so much. I was even ready to forgive you for your betrayal if you had come back. You named our daughter the name we had chosen. And her father? Diana looked at him with surprise. She realized that he sincerely asked about the father. So, you think that I loved you so much that I couldn't be with anyone else and went and had a child just like that? Willie paused and frowned. Diana sighed. I'm sorry, but you still. He looked at Diana for a while, then shifted his gaze to the sleeping girl and back to Diana. You mean? Teresa is my daughter? She's my child? Diana. It's a miracle. All right, we're leaving right now. We're going to my place, Kimberly is worried. And tomorrow we'll go wherever you say. The next morning, Diana hugged Kimberly. Don't cry. As soon as you hand over the house to Mom, give us a call. We'll come get you. Diana. Just don't leave me. I can't be without you and Teresa. Oh, come on. How could you think that? You raised me, and you'll raise my daughter too. They had already reached their car when another car pulled up to the house. Mrs. Mary and Mr. Dustin stepped out of it. The woman saw Willie and froze. Diana placed her hand on Willie's shoulder. Willie turned to Diana. I'll wait in the car. Diana nodded briefly and headed towards her parents. Dustin looked at his daughter sadly. He understood perfectly well that they had just lost their only child. Diana, I understand that we are unforgivable. But you won't hide our granddaughter from us, will you? Diana silently looked at her mother and then asked, Mom, is social status really more important than your child's happiness? The woman cried. You'll understand me when your daughter grows up. You'll understand. No, Mom, I won't understand. For me, the most important thing is for my child to be happy. You saw how much I suffered. And during all that time, you never confessed. And Willie. Do you even know what can happen to a person when they're told that their beloved has died? Mrs. Mary wanted to say something else, but Diana took her daughter's hand, and they walked towards the car. Willie immediately rushed out and helped them get into the car. They slowly drove away. Diana didn't even look at her parents. Mr. Dustin sighed. Well, now we're unwanted and alone. Nobody will give us a glass of water in old age, nobody will call us Grandma and Grandpa. And what about you, Mary? Do you feel happy? I don't. Get in the car. He sat down and slammed the door loudly, while Mary stood there for a long time, staring in the direction the car had gone, taking away her daughter, her granddaughter, and her whole meaning of life.
An amazing story, isn't it? Thank you for listening till the end. I sincerely hope that you truly enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate this video. See you in the comments and in new